Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
So, Ray Dalio, Schmanky, and Johnny are going to do a little book study. But first, we're going to introduce ourselves. Schmanky, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Name's Ismail Sanchez, Schmanky, aka. Um, yeah, background Georgia Tech, working as a financial consultant now. Background like kind of IB and investment theory. So, yeah, that's kind of a little about my background, and excited to get started on this book.
Did you have a childhood?
I sure did. Grew up in Georgia. Went to high school in Alpharetta, Johns Creek area. And it was a pretty good childhood, I would say. Pretty decent. Nothing crazy or worth calling out at this moment until we start getting real deep into the, childhood trauma portion of the segment. So
I'm sorry for pressing you so hard. I'm Johnny. Can you mute your mic, sir? I'm Johnny. I have a very similar background, some would say, to Ismail. I also went to Georgia Tech. I also grew up in Georgia. I'm also a male and had a childhood. But so specifically, I grew up around Ismail for real. But we didn't know each other until we went to Georgia Tech. We were roommates when I first got there. And yeah, so here we are, kind of like 3 years later, 4 years later. Me with a mechanical engineering degree, him with the easy way out. And yeah, so we're just reading.
yeah, not the easy way out though, man. Finance is hard, quote unquote. Definitely easy way out at Georgia Tech, but hey, still a hard school, and I think that we bring a pretty diverse little set of opinions here. So I think it should be a pretty interesting conversation because me and Johnny were talking a lot, even when we were living together at Georgia Tech, and definitely have a little bit of a, we agree on a lot of things, but as people kind of do, disagree on others, and it's one of those things where brings about good dialogue, and yeah, it's interesting to hear other people's opinions, So
Yeah. I think Izzy, you and I have always had some good conversations, especially over a beverage. Cheers.
salute. So I guess without further ado, go and get us started on what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So the book we're reading is called The Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order: Why Nations Succeed and Fail, which the title we're now going to refer to as PFDWTCWOY, or no, sorry, WNSAF by Ray Dalio. So first we're just gonna study this book like chronologically, like a sane human being would. And so first we're gonna try and start off with the intro of the book. But a little bit before that, Izzy, I was hoping to talk to you about like what do you hope to get out of the book study? Just like in like, I don't know, 2 sentences.
It's a tough one. I would say probably not even 2 sentences. 2 words would be perspective and awareness. Trying to just diversify my perspective. I have my opinions about the world and how it's going to develop. You have yours. We don't know because that's why it's forecasting, but awareness and perspective would be for me.
That's a great goal. I think I definitely Disagree completely. I'm just trying to piss as many people off as possible, including you. So
Yeah, that too.
let's just jump right into it. No, but I think one of the greatest things about our conversations is normally we don't always agree, but we do understand each other's perspectives a lot more. So I think we can continue that and hopefully, you know, like just learn a little more.
Yeah,
So
no better way to do it than to shoot the shit on a podcast and offend people and, drink bourbon and have a good time.
right. So all right. So now that we've sort of assessed our credibility to some extent, uh I want to jump in, go into the intro and kind of use that as like a jumping off point to assess the author's credibility and I don't know, just talk about anything interesting about the introduction. So, um first thing, the highest high level overview we can go is, what did Ray Dalio say he was going to do? He said he studied the last 500 years of kind of human civilization and tried to like extract patterns and stuff out of that. So right off the bat, what that makes me think of, like, I get good vibes from that personally because I'm a software engineer. And one of the other things he did over the 500 years to extract those patterns is he said, I don't exactly know where, but he said he used like algorithms, which probably includes AI for writing the book in this generation, you know? Um, and when I see 500 years of civilization, that gives me like a a good indicator of like good sampling. And so if you're going to try and predict the future, with AI, it's good that you tried to do it with the last 500 years of data, and clearly he's made a profit off of it. So
Yeah, and even on top of that, I mean, it's pretty impressive that he was the co-chief investment officer over at Bridgewater. Pretty big hedge fund. So, it's funny you're talking about the algorithms, and that's one big thing that a lot of hedge fund managers use, and, just kind of that quantitative analysis side of investment theory, like being able to generate algorithms to predict, essentially the cycles in the market, seeing what you could do. And obviously it's a very slippery slope because sometimes, some of the shit just doesn't pan out in the end. Like you can, again, like back to predicting the future, really hard to do. You have indicators, but at the end of the day, no man's going to know the future, and all the best you can do is, almost like the old saying, like, expect the worst and hope for the best. So from a finance perspective, the guy has his credibility for sure. He has his background. He founded Bridgewater. Really, really, really knowledgeable guy. Has been in the industry for a long time. I think he founded it in '85. So he's been around for a while. He knows how the market works. I'm sure he has some level of um, foresight. I guess I don't know if that's the right word, but he has some level of ability to be able to predict how markets are going to operate in the future. And he's well versed in terms of also history and bubbles bursting in certain industries. And he, to a level, a lot of people have hindsight bias, think that they know after the fact, but I'm sure he has some level of insight as to how the markets work.
one thing I'll say real quick is, to your point, I'm looking up like Ray Dalio 2008 crash. See, like, how did he perform in that most recent like bubble or whatever? And top two headlines, well, one is Bridgewater.com, but another is CNBC. Seems like Ray Dalio foresaw the 2008 financial crisis. The fact that Bridgewater is still around is also a pretty good indicator that that actually happened. Um, it's pretty interesting. Definitely some foresight there.
Yeah, and I mean it's CNBC. One another one to say was super reliable.
Not super reliable.
No, definitely super reliable. CNBC is my only news source I use personally.
I mean, I trust Google with my life savings, so second link, CNBC. I've heard the name before. They're on TV. Everything on TV is true.
Yeah, them and the Nigerian princes. It's all real, man. It's all real. Moon landing was fake, but hey, listen, that's a whole other topic.
All right, getting back on track. Where were we? So we were assessing Ray Dalio's credibility. Talking about some algorithms, good sampling, foresight, probably a combination of him being in the industry a while, just getting field experience, and probably these algorithms. I mean, the algorithms seem legit. If they're not published public online, they're probably legit. One thing I noticed, and so Izzy, this is where some of the conversations you and I have some tension over what kind of around the realm of the things I'm about to say, which is perfectly okay and totally encouraged. But on page 5, right? Let's flip to page 5.
Navigate, y'all. Go ahead and flip your books to page 5.
We see the quote: "No system of government, no economic system, no currency, and no empire lasts forever. Yet almost everyone is surprised and ruined when they fail." Now, I mean, first off, that seems legit. Like, of all the empires on Earth, I don't think there's a single one that's like really still around in the original form that it was. It's always transformed or like had periods of like seriously quick transformation that they may have like the same skin color or like even religion, but it sort of manifests itself in a different way. Now, and another thing that makes me think of is like I think it's 200-year kind of general lifespan on democracy. That's kind of what that quote makes me think of. If we like look back, I guess, at the democracies in here, the Netherlands and the British, right?
Mhm.
Generally speaking, they have like 200-year lifespans. And the US is almost at or actually a little overdue past its 200 years.
Yeah, I think it's 250. I think is what the time frame is. 250 years. So I think the point is that the United States is. I don't know if I could do that quick math right now, but they're rapidly approaching. Rapidly approaching.
But anyway, I agree with a lot of that quote, but one thing that I feel like it disregards is the Bible and kind of what the Bible says about kingdoms. From my perspective, I'm pretty sure the Bible is like, the things of this earth may pass away, but my words will never pass away. Like, it's kind of like an indicator of, the kingdom of heaven not ever passing away. And this quote, in addition to some other ones like sort of thrown out there, I'm sure I'll call it out when I see it, but this quote kind of makes me think that Ray Dalio doesn't have a completely biblical perspective. But again, we're going to come back to it. And it's just something to point out, something noteworthy.
No, for sure. It definitely is interesting, and it's kind of one of those things again with perspective and analyzing it how you will, because I'm sure others will take that same point and look at it from a purely historical standpoint. Like the Chinese, their dynasties are still going on, but they're just for better or for worse, it's a shell of what it used to be. It used to be very family cycle, blah blah blah. So you can explain it in the sense of it's temporary from the biblical perspective, or you can just as easily pivot and say, you know what, it's just the nature of man. You know what I mean? So definitely something we can revisit, but definitely for sure an interesting point. And, and I definitely, when you said we have a difference of opinion here, I definitely already I saw it coming. So
Well, let's talk about the last thing about the intro, and then we'll move on to the meat. Uh, one of the things I saw in the intro was this like sense of humility. Like I'm pretty sure uh he- one of the quotes he said, he was like, I gained a lot of knowledge and I've gained a lot of humility here. And then at the end of the intro, he has a whole section devoted to just uh like how much he doesn't know. Kind of like that whole spirit of you don't know what you don't know. It seems like Ray Dalio has embraced that based on some of his writing. And honestly, one of the things that does for me is like it gives me hope that this book isn't like total propaganda. Because I'm not gonna lie with you, like if it turns out that it is, I'm not afraid just to bail on the book and switch to something new.
yeah, and one thing I'll add real quick is it's kind of like what I remember we had a conversation a couple days back about how everything has an inherent bias, and how it doesn't matter because he's talking about this so far, at least he's speaking on, this changing world order in a purely, essentially from a very economist standpoint, how are the, I mean, he's looking at it very monetarily, and he's talking about rise of power and education and other things, but he's looking at it from a very almost agnostic standpoint. He's kind of stepping back, but at the end of the day, he mentions also in the precursor of the book, to introduction, he mentions how he spent a total of like I think it was like 20 years back and forth to China. Lot of interactions with China. So just there, and I'm not saying he's a pro China, whatever. But at the end of the day, he's experienced the culture enough and he's seen the country enough to where his perspective is very different than somebody else in the country who maybe never been to China or maybe never even left the country in general, never left the United States. So his perspective is automatically biased just because of that. So we take everything with a grain of salt, but if it's clearly from a political stance, that I can definitely, I'll be with, abandoning the book. But at the end of the day, so far at least, happily, he hasn't said anything like that thus far.
So I think maybe one interesting thing to maybe mention now and maybe come back to a little bit later is it seems that part of Ray Dalio's thesis is like the US is in decline and China's on the rise to replace us in that power vacuum. Because, I mean, it's pretty obvious the US is the world's superpower, like single handedly right now. Obviously, the US couldn't take over the world if they just wanted to on a whim, but like we kind of have a good stranglehold on the economy. And that's pretty evident through the fact that we can just print $32 trillion overnight and just everyone accepts it. Like, uh, so that's definitely part of his thesis and not something I agree with 100%. I think it's also a good possibility, and we should keep this in mind as we go through, that maybe a system that we've never seen before emerges, like maybe some sort of cooperative global thing takes over, like more globalist than any other country like thing that we've seen generally throughout civilizations. And it's not too far off considering at one point there weren't even countries. Our communication kind of just got better. And okay, we got horses and roads, and now we have letters and stuff like that. Like we know our longitude and latitude. We can enforce boundaries. Okay, now we have the internet, stuff like this. Like maybe that communication increase that we saw like over the past 20 years could lead to that new system, kind of like countries emerging from no countries, globalist society thing, like emerging from countries.
So then I got a quick question then, because when you were saying that, it made me think of an empire. Because an empire, hypothetically, if an empire were to take over the entire world, wouldn't that also be, wouldn't that fall under the umbrella of globalism? Because it's globalist if it's everybody's on the same page for everything. So, in a sense, the Romans were globalists in the sense of they wanted to conquer the entire known world and put everything kind of almost systematically the same within all of their provinces, all their territories, no matter what race, creed, whatever. So it just makes me think, like, when it's talking about globalism, that could also very well be a imperial regime that is that large, that can encompass every corner of the globe and have full monopoly on all trade, all industry, everything. So everything is feeding itself. It doesn't need any trade. It doesn't need to be selling and buying resources from other countries. It will handle everything internally and operate like one large society. Just something to think about.
Yeah, and I mean certainly that, like, I could see China fulfilling that role potentially if like that global power structure, like most of the people in there like came from China as we know it now. But if it was like, oh, like some from China, some from the US, some from Iran, some from Russia, some from Australia, EU. You know, you've heard of like the 7 regions thing, right?
I don't know. Well, fill me in. I might know about it, but
I'm gonna have to look this up. But I'm kind of thinking like, and you know, again, we can come back to this later. But let me find the 7 regions thing. You just go on.
well, yeah, I will continue because I was also gonna add, like, you know, that's a purely hypothetical scenario because from when you look at it like realistically, the amount of supplies, the amount of military force required to do a thing like that would be insane compared to anything the world's ever seen. You would need to have essentially you would need to pretty much overwhelm the rest of the world in terms of military personnel. Because the minute you're overwhelmed when you have a minority in terms of military to other people, or equipment or supplies chain is off, you are screwed because there's going to be rebellion. That's how it is. And for one society to conquer all the corners of the globe and operate it under the same rule, it would take a long time, a lot of resources, and it's pretty damn near impossible. Honestly, you
Oh,
can't do that.
and I mean, so the reason I brought this up is because I think we're heading into that globalist thing based on what the Bible says. And also based on what the Bible says, that kind of aligns with your point. Like that globalist thing only lasts for 7 years. You know, Babylon back in the day fell. Like that was the globalist thing. Everyone spoke the same language, you know, had the same laws, Tower of Babel. Same thing is going to happen if and when this like globalist thing happens. Like it is possible. Like it may happen for a little while, but uh I mean, yeah, it's bound to fail.
Well, if you think about it, no one wants to be conquered, right? No one's like, please conquer me, like at all. Especially under an imperialistic regime, no one's like when Japan was expanding, when the Mongols were the biggest land empire ever known to man, and nobody when the Mongols were knocking were like, you know what, this is good. Let's have them come in and take part in our culture. Like, no, the Mongols destroyed. That's what they did. So at the end of the day, for one power to dominate the rest of the world through military might, which is what it's going to take. It doesn't matter if you have an economic stranglehold on somebody.
Are you sure? Like what if you have an economic stranglehold like on kind of literally everyone, right? Like if you, because what I'll give you an example, right? The vaccine like passports or whatever. There were some cities who would just like not let you go to work, who would fire you um just because you didn't take a vaccine, right? What if there was something that emerged that they were like, okay, you have to take this to be involved in the economy, but it's not like that unreasonable. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you have to, it's like a one-time thing. You have to like get your fingernails trimmed. And it's free and it's guaranteed to take like 30 minutes. And no more time than that. And if you don't do it, then you can't buy or sell anything. Like in terms of that, like if that was, it was kind of like the vaccine where it actually was enforced. And I don't know, I feel like that's the economic stranglehold, because clearly you can't do it militarily. Like you're gonna get shot up with some nukes and everyone's gonna die.
If it's coming from
Oh, sorry. You just muted yourself and then unmuted yourself?
Belarus. Oh, people are strong.
I'm one of those people.
You know,
Save everybody. I feel you. I feel you there. It would have to happen under a system that we essentially can't even imagine because it literally hasn't been able to happen before. Um, at least as far as we know. Who knows what it really looked like in Babylon? But anyway, okay, that was the intro. We're making good time here. I think we're about 30 minutes in. Uh, yeah. So we're making good time.
like 20 minutes.
let's move on to part 1, chapter 1. So part 1, high level.
Wait, we gotta cheers to chapter 2, part 1.
Oh wait, I need more bourbon.
Oh, there's a little. Think about making a nice fruity cocktail with some coconut water.
That would be
Just
rather fruity of you.
That's ruining damn good bourbon. Strong pour for a strong man.
What is this called again?
Eagle Rare 10-year bourbon.
I meant like the container it's in.
Oh, it's a decanter. It's a little. I got it from Amazon.
And that's okay. So cheers to the intro.
Damn, yours is so much darker. Mine's watered down.
Well, I finished my first glass. Get this man some keys. Made sure to get that on the mic. Okay.
Part 1.
Part 1, high level overview. This is like straight out of the intro. Part 1 is archetypical rise and decline of empires. So going into why is the U.S. falling down the stairs right now? And chapter 1 is the big cycle in a nutshell. That is the title of it. And so the big cycle in the nutshell again is just referring back to his thesis that empires always rise and fall. And we're going to just analyze some empires through the lens of our first topic, the 8 determinants of wealth and power. You want to jump into this graph?
Jump in.
So for y'all following along, we're going to actually the end of chapter 1. We have some fun conversations planned, but we need a framework. So this is kind of a good framework, I feel like, to analyze, U.S. and China. I feel like that's just a fun conversation. So, what are the 8 determinants of wealth and power? So we're looking on page 54 on the hardcover. If you're on paperback, you get the hardcover. That's right. If you're mad, we did our job. Okay. So what did you say they were? Education, innovation, and technology. Oh, that you already wrote them down. Education, competitiveness, innovation and technology, economic outputs like GDP, share of world trade, military power, financial center strength. So this is like strength of banks, hard assets held domestically, so gold and NFTs, and reserve currency status.
Yeah, and just
So just a quick tangent. I'm really glad you defined it that way because one of the main points we were discussing this before was like he brought up the greatest like indicator of productivity is human labor, which I disagree with. Like it is cost competitiveness at its core because like no matter if you can pay like humans 2 cents an hour, you can always pay an AI like once it's advanced enough to do it for like half a cent an hour. Especially if another AI program that AI, the cost effectiveness of technology like non-human labor, automated labor, like turns economic or cost competitiveness, like turns the afterburners on, you know?
The Congo. And the
So I like in terms of like third world countries, I think you're right. But like if we extend those lines, like cost competitiveness, right? Like if you're at 2 cents an hour, a penny and a half an hour in Indonesia, like that's pretty much the upper limit of human labor cost competitiveness. The only way you're going to like increase your cost competitiveness is the amount of humans. But if you're talking about AI, like yeah, your cost competitiveness curve is definitely 100% lower in the beginning, but the ceiling of that is much higher because again, like AI is literally exponential when I mean, human growth is exponential. I'm just not sure we can reproduce as fast as AI. Cuz like think about like 9 months in the womb to make a baby, like what? Like a month for an AI to code another AI that could do its job better and then
No, no, I get your point. I'm just curious though because it brings up an interesting thought because also I've got that going a little bit.
we're just off doing art and enjoying ourselves with UBI. And so we also have three main sections here: the rise, the top, and the decline.
Yes.
So generally, I feel like there's about the same amount of green in the rise and the top, and then the decline is just kind of all red in all categories.
So they're at
You
that
make a
point.
good point. They're they're on the rise, is what you're saying.
They are getting
So, and I feel like that same analysis, like if we're saying India is maybe in this, like between this first and second column, I feel like their military strength is a good indicator of this too. Like they're definitely like powerful, but they're not really gonna, you're not really gonna be super worried about them. Like if you're the US, like at the top, you know, it's like they're a concern. They could nuke us, but like conventional warfare, they have a lot of people. They might beat us, but we got some missiles.
militaries big because they to match it.
They are certainly a force to be reckoned with. As far as reserve currency status, this is obvious, like an easy indicator. What is their currency? The ruble. They got
Rupee.
rupees.
Ruble's Russia.
Oh, okay. So rupee not doing good. If we're also talking about Russia right now, they are also not doing good. They're probably on that. They're probably on that red status, but they're on more like the back end of that red
Decline. And they're
infrastructure. They literally don't have roads, bruh. Okay, and what else do we have here? Infrastructure and investment. Yeah, I mean, I would say India is at the point of investing in things right now, right? Like, that's definitely a green category, like compared to legitimate third world countries that are just like not even considered, you know, where just like kind of everything is red and it's never gone the green. Like, you know, they are doing invested there. Um,
oh, you know, it's like a third world country versus the
Interesting.
United States.
All right, sorry. In terms of governance rule of law, as we are sitting in Atlanta here today, we are about to experience some protests that some might call violent or riots, or I call it what you want. I just refer to it as Cop City. Um, and you know, where the only two places I can surmise that the governance rule law is in the red is, I mean, it's either they haven't risen yet, they're like pre-rise, or they are in the decline. And India, probably in that pre-rise area, like if they get their shit together. US, hate to say it, we're past our prime.
Not looking good. And I'll tell you, Japan. Huh?
FR. Yeah, and so we're talking about this rise, top, decline stuff a lot. I think it would be helpful to kind of like flip back to the graph. Oh, there was another graph. Page 40 and 42. Kind of shows uh like I don't know how you would describe it as more than like a sum of all these metrics, like kind of a weighted average of sorts, kind of adding them all up. I wish I knew exactly what this is called right now, but um, the title "Relative Standing of Great Empires," which is again a sum of these, like pretty much the 8 determinants of wealth and power. I assume this is kind of like some of the outputs of the models that Bridgewater uses. Um, we we can kind of see this rise and fall, how it isn't like exactly a smooth up and down, kind of like that first chart we were looking at might make it seem like. We can kind of see, like for India's case, you could probably imagine there having some bumps on the rise, right? So if we go to, I don't know, what's this blue country? I don't even know. It's not even labeled. All right, let's go to page 38. You look at the United Kingdom, you see some bumps in the rise here up to what, 1860 or something like that. Um, India is probably going through a similar thing, just like when there's bumps at the top. Like it's generally a plateau, but it's not going to always be a smooth top. It'd be cool to see page 54's graph kind of broken down into smaller segments to see if like maybe there's some micro trends like at the top or on the rise or on the decline.
Yeah. I think the perspective, but exception of the United States. Because look at China. Then you add.
I would agree with that. And, it seems like the United States today, like, we can definitely tell that we're not a homogenous society. We're sort of like, I feel like for a time, the vast majority of the United States was kind of homogenous in terms of their worldview. Like, obviously, there were pockets here and there of people who like didn't like the Constitution, and obviously there were vast majority groups of people who didn't like the Constitution because we have like amendments, like women are able to vote now, like uh black people are able to vote now, like a lot of people are able to vote now that weren't a part of a part of the original Constitution. Like there's a lot of rights like that that the vast majority agreed were rights. But kind of underpinning the Constitution, I mean, to me, seems like a biblical worldview, which the founders of our country and in general, maybe with apart from like Mormons and stuff, this was kind of like a country with a biblical worldview. Uh, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Wow. And talk like you. Not Mexican.
Panamanian.
Panamanian.
One of the things I think you brought up was like the US was kind of founded because people didn't really like how things were going in other places and other like developed nations. And so these founding fathers, they like designed a system that kind of allowed you to change it because they were like, oh, well, we were stuck in the system we couldn't change, so we had to get out. Now here's a system you can change, but I feel like we've kind of gone back to a system we can't change,
Mm.
like I don't like, and I think about, okay, what's the thing like everyone votes for? The lesser of two evils. The best thing you can hope for is gridlock. Like, what are we doing? We've strayed so far from that like kind of core value that um I don't know, like kind of our our nation kind of stands on, it seems like. Hey, I'd run for office. I just feel like the system's rigged, so I wouldn't get many votes. But if if I'm convinced that I don't get enough votes, I'll run for office. I'll tell you that.
You know.
Like Pence.
Oh, that guy has no.
Do you have any classified documents lying around? Okay. Um, so hey, let's flip to page 28. Let's just get crazy here. Human adaptability. I feel like this kind of goes along with what we were talking about. Like the US was, founded on our like ability to adapt. Like we want to change. We know we're supposed to change. Uh oh, turns out this quote is the one I was referring to earlier. That's awkward. Human productivity is the most important force in causing the world's total wealth, power, and living standards to rise over time. I would say within the last 500 years, that has no doubt been the case. Whether that's going to be the case in the future, we shall see. And maybe that's a conversation for a little bit later since we already touched on that.
I will say I think I put the wrong page number in there because. Oh, I'm echoing.
Look for it in your phone notes. I have something that reminds me of. In terms of like hardiness and recovery, the question that makes me think of is like, could the US potentially recover from the situation I guess we've gotten ourselves in? Like, can we stop rioting and maybe like elect officials to change the laws if we don't like the laws that the police are enforcing? Like, could we do that? I don't know. Um, but it makes me think back to this graph, right? On page 40, we see from the year 600 to the year I guess probably 2021, probably. I don't Is that when this book was written? uh who knows? Seems right. Last Chance, 2021. Simon and Schuster. We see like a little blip in the United States' rise. And meanwhile, like China's had huge blips on their like big cycles essentially. Um and I guess the question that makes me ask is like is this just like a temporary blip that we're at the top of, or are we gonna fall down? Can you remind me of when Mao was around?
And then it was the party state.
I guess I also have a computer in front of me and could have looked that up. But thank you.
Here, real quick for
Although one fun fact that's pretty interesting is I believe it was during the Great Depression. Um, the deer population in the US almost went extinct because so many people were hunting. I guess 'cause, I guess cheap source of food. Like you invest in some bullets, and if you land one in a deer, then you have meat for a winter for a man, or two men. I don't really know much of deer feeds. I probably should. Georgia boy. And self-defense too. Like you buy those bullets, you have a gun. It's an investment. It truly is. And I'd like to call out our sponsor, Glock, for sponsoring this episode. Glock is a gun manufacturer where they make their guns in Austria. They're a sponsor. Are you saying I look like a turkey with all the lines in it?
that was let's get back to it. What okay,
I believe AI has a very high ceiling.
There.
So I think in terms of your first question, like it was what could we survive like an asteroid or something like that? Like I think you already brought up the example, the US, like, we went through the Great Depression and we're here. There's but you look at the China graph, they were invaded by the Mongols, now they're here competing with us. And yeah, you look at natural disasters and stuff and we recover from it. Um and can AI help us get through that? Is that kind of
And then the second.
so I would say that I mean the Bible describes a situation where God literally is like, okay, humans would not survive this if the days of the earth weren't cut short, right? So I believe that there is really it's a series of natural disasters combined with like human dynamics. Because like half of our problems aren't just like earthquakes or famines or pandemics. It's like, okay, we have an earthquake, a pandemic, a fire, a drought, and now we have a dictator. Like on top of all of that. That's
Right.
kind of really what it like. And there's another graph in here which really shows that. It's like it's really just kind of one of those perfect storm things that happens. And I mean, if you look at page 33, you can okay, so we see like estimated deaths from like conflict and stuff like that. Um and it was in World War II that you said the Soviet Union was probably at their top, at their peak, like Soviet Union and stuff like that. They did lose a whole lot of people, which is kind of the point I was making.
By far the most.
See, like on this bottom graph, right? We have World War II, communist revolutions, and World War One, really right before it. But we know Russia like contributed to so many of those deaths. Okay, now let's go up to the graph right above, which is on the same time scale, and we see global deaths by category, and we see famines, pandemics, natural disasters, and conflicts. Now, I guess the conflicts are this bottom stuff, estimated deaths from conflict. But we see these earthquakes and pandemics and famines, natural disasters like layered on top, like kind of in this perfect storm. And that's what tips these empires over the edge. So it's like the human factor and the like kind of external stuff going on. So that's your first question, right? What are the circumstances that would maybe lead to an unadaptable human response, right? Like humans just can't adapt fast enough or whatever. And now, if we could, the question that makes me kind of ask with relation to AI is like, if we can design an AI or like an army of AI, a population of bots, of algorithms to cooperate and survive through a situation like that, I guess in a way that we would define as meaningful. Because, like, surely if you just threw a rock on the ground and you're like, define survival as that rock, I guess, still exists in 1,000 years, it's not really meaningful. But our human survival meaningfulness is like, okay, we're like creating these things, our population is growing, like stuff like that. If we take those same metrics and apply it to AI, if they can do that, does that mean humans are meaningless? I don't think so. um does AI have the potential to do that? I think so. I think they could survive meaningfully through a bunch of natural disasters, and um maybe they could survive more severe disasters because they can think a lot faster, just because they're, I don't know why AI can think a lot faster, but they can. um they can digest the whole internet in a matter of hours, right? uh I couldn't digest the internet in a whole lifetime, and even if I did, I wouldn't remember it all. So there's that. Um, so would it make humans meaningless though? I don't think so, because even if AI could survive all that, would they have a soul? And that's kind of the big question. No.
Apologies.
Well, I mean, that to me, I feel like that question is kind of like the question of a soul. It's like, what's the purpose? Does this thing have a soul? Like, what's our purpose, right? Like, it's not immediately clear to me what our purpose is, especially if you don't have biblical worldview, or like don't have like a worldview that includes God in it. And even if your worldview does include God in it, it's like hard to even answer the question, like, why did God make us? What is God's purpose? Um, and so if it's like, if humans weren't around and AI was, it's like that intelligence still exists. We're still struggling to answer this purpose question. Like, we're evolving as humans. AI can evolve too. Like, it's clearly capable of coding. Like, there's an AI you can code very, very easily that's like, just don't create errors in this code and like make it run longer or something. Like, you can program like just reward circuits in the AI similar to, I don't know, dopamine in the human brain, or like our emotional sense of fulfillment or happiness or whatever you're pursuing. Um and I mean, so it's like, it makes me think like, humans and AI could have the same value, or humans could be valued more. But I don't think AI can be valued more than humans in terms of like purpose, unless our purpose was to design an AI with a purpose greater than ours. But again, that's not immediately clear to me, and that's seems like pretty low probability. Hmm. Um, I mean, one thing I've heard a lot recently is nationalism. Um, and we looked back to Mao, right? I feel like that was a big thing that he started. Because what what was Mao's rise to power like? Was that where all the college kids were like, "I'm gonna kill you, mom, because you don't like Mao"? Is that kinda the vibe? Well, I mean, so there was a form of, like, unified identity against Japan, brought everyone together. So, like, a shared worldview, kind of. Um, and then Mao kinda got his folks together to get everyone on the same kinda internal economic page, because I guess, Chiang Kai-shek was capitalist, you said, and Mao a communist?
Yes, and I think another one.
We have a visitor.
You want to turn them around?
I know your original question was, why did the Chinese recover so quickly? But I wonder what the world would have looked like if, like, Mao's troops were the ones who died and Chiang Kai-shek was able to, like, essentially do the same thing as Mao, and now we have a US and China powerhouse that are much more unified than we are today. Like, what would the world look like then? Oh, so now we get back to China, Taiwan.
Yep. And that's how
How the puzzle pieces. And the puzzle's puzzle. So, just a quick diagnosis of where China is today. Talk about the US a little bit. We talked about India. We talked about the globalists. Where is China today? They had a quick recovery. As you can see throughout the graph, I think it was page 42 or 38 or something. They have had some ups and downs, most certainly. Uh, so do you think Ray is pretty accurate in thinking like the US and China are where they are, or like is the graph deceiving? Because one thing you talked about earlier was the yin and yang thing, where it's like the US and China relationship, it makes them both powerful, but if one of them falls, it seems like the other one is probably gonna fall. Because of just how economically dependent they are on each other. You know, I think on that China note, it is interesting that they don't have the global reserve currency. It is interesting, though, how their currency may be lining up, or at least concepts from their currency may be lining up to be something like the next global reserve currency. In my opinion, I think the next global reserve currency is going to be uh, digital. I think things are a lot more transparent that way. If, let's say, we use the blockchain as the data structure to track currency, even if it isn't decentralized, like it's pretty transparent. Like I work with the blockchain, and you know, I can go type in the address of a coin and see how much of it there is, and who owns how much, and I can track every transaction from the time the money was printed. And it's interesting to me that, China has their social credit system. They might have a digital currency. I'm pretty sure they do. They're like rolling it out. Um, so it's interesting to me that, China's pretty technologically advanced. They, part of that yin and yang is, unfortunately, they have a habit of infiltrating US companies and stealing data and stuff like that. You look at Huawei and, why the US military ban all their 5G gear and phones from entering us, and why are universities banning TikTok? I think there's a trend here. Um, oh my, but you look at that global reserve currency thing, and that's a pretty big indicator of the superpower. And it is interesting that China's a lot closer to what the future global reserve currency could look like. We could be at that point, Ray Dalio makes the point that we've only been on fiat for a little while. So it certainly wouldn't be out of the norm to be back on a more hard currency. Maybe we have gold reserves, and we are, maybe we have cash in the future. Maybe it's digital dollars that are kind of like assigned to this weight in gold. You know what I mean? One of the interesting things I've been thinking about lately is like human productivity growth. And I mean, let's just like think about GDP growth. Like we are net like adding concrete value, like as we reproduce. Like two humans are worth more than one, because There's a lot of potential. Like if they're babies, you could train them to do whatever you want. It's like an investment. Um, and when they're older, you can put them to work. You can make them code. You can make them reproduce. You can make them consult. Um, uh, but with that increase in like concrete value in the world, like, do we need to have uh like stuff that represents that value sort of like increase in volume, i.e., like, do we need to print more money to represent that growing value? um I would argue like you kind of do. I think if you want people's savings to mean something, like if you didn't print money, then people who save money would be incentivized to like keep saving money, because like the same amount of money, like $10 was worth $10 of stuff. But if $10 was worth $20 of stuff and we didn't print 10 more dollars, then the people who saved their $5 would have, instead of like 5, or would it be like 10 over 5, it would be 20 over 5. You know what I mean? So their savings would grow just because the GDP is growing. So to me, I feel like an argument for a more like fiat currency, a more flexible currency, one that we can track exactly how much value we're adding and could be algorithmically programmed to track along with the concrete value being added to the economy. uh there's an argument to be made for that to go like digital, to have like the best currency possible.
Hey,
So unfortunately, I don't think it is. I think, like, if you're thinking about it in terms of like a capitalist lens, there's always I was really trying to find this video earlier while I was reading, but I couldn't find the one I wanted. But it was essentially a video where it was simulating a capitalist economy where it was like everyone started out the same amount. And I think it ends up in like a Pareto distribution where it's like a few people, they gather a bunch of wealth at the beginning, and then they invest on that wealth, and it's like an exponential gain, and then the wealth distribution just gets so out of whack. Like everyone's poor except like two people. Um, and so unfortunately, like I don't think a perfect currency that tracks the GDP perfectly and is printed algorithm like according to an algorithm and not at the whim of a random human who just wants to survive or whatever. Um, I don't think that currency would be the silver bullet. I think it's more of like a larger systemic thing, which, again, we probably haven't seen before.
What's which is wild.
And ultimately, China owns your electricity or your roads or your port in that case, when you're tired of labor, they didn't actually pay you enough money to like own or buy the factory. They just kind of have a monopoly on your own resource. And one thing we've never seen before, I don't think, is China like going as worldwide as they are. Yeah, they're a pretty big player in Africa as far as I'm aware. Um just makes me wonder, their currency isn't the global reserve, like if they don't make sustainable investments that like make a profit not in US dollars, has to be like concrete value. And uh this investment of turning or resources into electricity, you're gonna have some debt to pay down that I don't know, maybe you could pay it with debt. Like maybe that's what they're doing, just buying US bonds and handing out these bonds to other countries. I don't know. Uh but the sustainability of China is definitely on my mind. Um but anyway, I think to wrap all this up, 'cause we've gone a little long here.
Well, no,
And I think that kind of economic warfare is kind of what we need to keep our eye on. It's like economic and worldview warfare, right? Because I mean, at this point, like military conflict for the most part, unless you're like first world country, yeah, first world versus a third world country, like, and you can guarantee that it's only going to be conventional warfare because one of the countries doesn't have nukes. Like, military warfare is kind of off the table because if you're going to beat a country militarily with, then they have nukes, then they're just going to nuke you. Like, possibly, probably. At least that's the assumption. But now we're looking at a world that's unprecedented because now we can destroy the whole world. Just on a whim, just press the button and all the nukes go out everywhere. We're looking at a world where it's like, okay, how far can you like brainwash the population to go along with you? And how can you like control kind of the value that they produce? Like, I guess with your currency, with whatever your system is. And I think we're at a point now where it's like the entity that's gonna be filling this new world order vacuum that, I mean, Ray sees coming up, that it seems like there's a chance of coming up, um, is gonna be filled by the country or entity that can like expand economically and I guess worldview wise the quickest, and kind of make everyone just either agree to agree or agree to disagree and like kind of move on.
Yeah, I don't know what movie.
So, all right. One of the last things I'd like to say on that point, wouldn't it be interesting to see whatever entity this is that's arising, like just only have nukes as their military, just like only nukes, no conventional warfare investments, and all the conventional warfare and would-be investments are just invested economically. Would that country succeed? I don't know. Leave a comment below. All right, but that about sums up the intro in chapter 1 of Ray Dalio's PFD WTC WOWN SAF Ray Dalio.
RD.
So thanks for joining. This was again Johnny Ismail. Follow us on LinkedIn, whatever floats your boat.
Around till next time.